The year was 1305. London was alive with sound. Vendors shouted from their stalls. Horse hooves echoed on stone streets. Life moved as usual, but this August morning was different. Something dark was coming. People gathered before sunrise. Not for trade, not for celebration. They came to witness death. A restless energy filled the air. The crowd grew larger, louder, hungrier. The name on everyone's lips was William Wallace, a Scottish knight, a rebel, a symbol of resistance. He had challenged the English crown, he had united his people. For that defiance, he was condemned. This was not a normal execution, it was a message, a warning to the world. Ordered by King Edward I, known as Longshanks, a king who ruled through fear. Edward wanted obedience, not mercy, not justice. History would later soften this moment. Films would make Wallace's death noble. Quickly, and the truth was far darker. Wallace faced hanging, drawing, and quartering, the most brutal punishment of the age. Reserved only for traitors, it was meant to destroy more than a body. It was meant to destroy hope. To understand this cruelty, we'll look back. Scotland was divided, unstable, its future uncertain. Edward saw opportunity. To him, Scotland was not a nation. It was a rebellious territory. William Wallace rose from this chaos. Not a powerful lord, not a royal heir, just a landowner driven by laws. His family suffered under occupation. Grief turned into anger. Anger turned into resistance. In 1297, Wallace struck back at Stirling Bridge. Against impossible odds, he won. England was shocked. Scotland, believed again Edward, felt humiliation. Rebellion could not be allowed to spread. Wallace became a symbol. By 1305, most nobles surrendered. Survival mattered more than freedom. Wallace refused to bow. That made him dangerous. The hunt for him lasted years. Spies filled the land. Betrayal closed in. Eventually, Wallace was captured, dragged south in chains, displayed as a criminal. His trial was a performance. That verdict was decided. On execution day, thousands watched. Children climbed for a better view. Adults cheered. Pain became entertainment. Wallace never begged, never apologized, never accepted English rule. His body was destroyed piece by piece. The cruelty was deliberate. The message was clear. Edward believed fear would end rebellion. He was wrong. Wallace did not die as a warning. He died as a martyr. His legacy survived. Scotland remembered. History remembered. William Wallace became immortal. The year was 1305, and London was alive with sound. Vendors shouted their prices while horse hooves echoed across cobblestone streets. Life moved as it always had, but beneath the noise, something darker was building. On the morning of August 23rd, the city awoke under clear, warm skies, and from the earliest hours, tension hung in the air. London had been preparing for days. Scaffolds were raised, streets cleared, and word spread far beyond the city walls. People traveled from across England to witness the death of a Scottish rebel, drawn by curiosity, loyalty, or cruelty. The authorities welcomed the crowds, turning the execution into a public event rather than a solemn act of justice. It felt almost like a holiday. Vendors sold food and ale, laughter mixed with anticipation, and excitement replaced empathy. This was not about law or fairness. It was about reminding everyone who held power. The man at the center of it all was William Wallace, a Scottish knight, a rebel, and a symbol of resistance. He had dared to challenge the English crown and unite his people against foreign rule. For King Edward I, known as Longshanks, this defiance could not go unanswered. Wallace's death was meant to terrify, to crush hope, and to silence rebellion forever. Under heavy guard, Wallace was brought out from captivity. The man who once led armies now stood alone. He was stripped of his clothing in public, his dignity taken long before his life. His hands were bound tightly and he was tied to a wooden hurdle. This rough frame served only one purpose: to drag a body through the streets as a form of humiliation. Horses were attached, and the procession began to move slowly through London's busiest roads. The route was carefully planned, not to be quick, but to be as public and degrading as possible. From the Tower of London, they moved through markets and crowded streets, ensuring everyone would see him. As the horses pulled forward, Wallace was dragged behind them, stone tearing into his flesh with every movement. Blood stained the cobblestones, marking his final journey with a trail no one could ignore. Crowds packed both sides of the streets. Some watched in silence, others cheered and laughed openly. Insults followed him as he passed, and objects were thrown from the crowd without restraint. The guards made no effort to stop it. This humiliation was intentional and encouraged. Public executions in medieval England were entertainment. Pain was meant to be seen and enjoyed. The procession moved slowly on purpose, stretching every second of suffering as long as possible. Despite the agony, Wallace remained conscious. Witnesses later said his eyes stayed fixed ahead. No one knew what he was thinking, whether defiance, resignation, or silent resolve. But one thing was clear to everyone watching: he never cried out. He never begged for mercy. and that silence would later become part of his legend. Eventually, the procession reached Smithfield, London's traditional place of execution. A scaffold stood waiting, built specifically for this moment, and the crowd here was even larger. People arrived hours early for the best view. Vendors continued selling food and drink like it was a festival. The atmosphere felt disturbingly celebratory, exactly as the authorities intended. They wanted Wallace's death remembered as a victory, not as martyrdom. The executioner stepped forward calmly, an experienced professional with no hesitation. Wallace was placed beneath the rope, and the noose was tightened around his neck. He was lifted from the ground, but his neck did not break. The rope had been positioned carefully, ensuring strangulation rather than a quick death. Wallace struggled as air left his lungs, his body convulsed, and his face darkened. The crowd watched closely as life began to fade from him. Just before unconsciousness took hold, he was cut down. He was still alive, still aware, still suffering. What followed was even more horrific, the drawing and quartering designed to erase him completely. His body was mutilated in full view of the crowd, each act meant to break both flesh and spirit. This was cruelty as theater, violence as a message from the crown. King Edward believed fear would end rebellion forever. He was wrong. William Wallace did not die as a warning. He died as a martyr. His execution did not destroy his legacy. It strengthened it. Instead of silencing resistance, it fueled it. Scotland remembered what England wanted, forgotten. Centuries later, history still remembers his name. William Wallace became more than a man. He became a symbol of defiance, a reminder of sacrifice, and the terrible cost of freedom.